I'm a bit embarrassed to admit it, but I met him over Twitter. Technology is one hell of a thing. I was followed by Kyle Rokins one morning. The account is now deactivated. His location was my city, Des Moines. He looked very cute in the thumbnail of his picture, and even cuter when I clicked to enlarge it, so being a rather lonely girl that I am, I followed him back. I'm 28, live alone, and work at a local bar as a bartender. I'm beginning to feel the pressures of isolation, the constant feeling of rejection tinged with a sense of hopelessness. As a girl, I'd always dreamed of a princess wedding adorned with purple and gold. The older I got, the more I felt this dream slipping away, like it was drying up. It was perhaps my biggest mistake to have posted about these desires and afflictions on my Twitter page, to have exposed my weakness, waiting to be manipulated. He direct messaged me shortly after. Soon we exchanged phone numbers, began texting, and he started reeling me in. I deleted all the messages I had with him in attempts to heal the inexplicable wounds he inflicted to my being, as I'm about to explain. He had hazel eyes that complemented golden skin and auburn hair. His jaw could cut through stone, and his chiseled body was like that of God. He paid me his undivided attention. He'd say things like, "I knew from the moment I saw you that I had to have you," right from the get-go. He'd send selfies, to which he'd shortly replied with selfies of his own. I opened up my entire life to him, my past, fears, ambitions. Now that I think about it, he kept me so busy talking about myself that I neglected to ask about his life. I knew little to nothing about him, nothing about where he worked, his parents, or anything. But you could say he stole my heart right from the beginning. To me, he was perfect. It wasn't long before he asked me to have dinner at his house. There was absolutely no way in hell I was going to turn that invitation down. I spent 3 hours getting ready that evening. I wore a casual evergreen dress paired with maroon lipstick and loosely curled hair. I wanted to look my best for him. I drove over to the address that he gave me and pulled up to a modest little bungalow. I rang the doorbell and he came to the door. He was even more mesmerizing in person. Hey, he smiled, showing off his perfect white teeth. He hugged me tight. "You have no idea how much I've missed you," he whispered into the curve of my neck. That was a bit odd of him to say, I thought, as this was our first time meeting. I assumed it was just innocent affection. The house was beautiful inside. The sweet aroma of spiced apples consumed your senses as soon as you entered. The furniture sat on a cherry wood floor and gave off more of a traditional feel, but was neatly and eloquently arranged, the rest of the house tastefully decorated. There were paintings of landscapes spread across the walls, but there were no family or childhood photos to be seen, as you would expect there to be in a home. I was hoping to see some, to get some insight into his life, but I quickly forgot about this wish as soon as he took me into the kitchen and began cooking for me. He prepared an eggplant casserole served with steamed asparagus, sautéed mushrooms, and red wine, followed by sticky toffee puddling with vanilla bean ice cream. A chef, too? I fell in love with him even more. We danced to 50s music on his record player, laughed, and conversed the entire night. Under the influence of a wine buzz, one thing led to another, and we ended off the night by making sweet, passionate love. It was an all-in-all perfect night. My heart was his. I should go, it's getting late. I didn't want to seem too clingy or attached, though it felt like I could stay tangled in his muscular arms forever. "Promise me I'll get to see you tomorrow?" he smiled wide. Of course, I smiled back, and on that note, I left. The next morning, I woke up expecting a good morning text, as he sent me one every morning, and maybe even a cheerful mention about the previous night. No text. So I texted him, "Rise and shine, you." The message failed to deliver. I was taken by surprise. I called his number, assuming it might have been a data or a texting problem from my end. "The number you have called does not exist." At that point, I started worrying that something had happened to him. I went to direct message him on Twitter, but like previously mentioned, it was gone, likely deactivated. I was convinced he was the man of my dreams, the man the universe had conspired for me to meet, my destiny. Half a day passed, and I became hysterical. I paced around my living room, thinking about what he was doing, what he was thinking. I drove myself mad with the idea that I had done something to scare him off. I started pounding the sides of my head. This couldn't be how we ended. I was going to confront him, and I was going to go back to his house. I went to the bungalow the next day, and knocked, and an old woman answered the door. She was at least 80, probably 3 inches shorter than she actually was, with a hunched back and shoulder-length snow-white hair. The arrangement of furniture was the same, but the aroma of spiced apples had been replaced by the smell of mothballs. I was confused as fuck. "Hello, may I help you?" she asked politely with a wild smile across her face. "Is Kyle here?" I asked, muddled. I didn't know he lived with anyone. This woman looked too old to be his mother. Perhaps she was his grandmother, I thought. "Is this another prank?" She raised her voice. She seemed a mix of agitated and upset. "A prank? What on earth are you talking about?" "Ma'am, I assure you I have no idea what you're talking about. I came to this house the other night to meet a man named Kyle Rokins the other night." She broke into sobs of despair. "You're the third one this year. Every time I go to visit my sister in Florida, I come back to a pretty young girl standing on my front porch asking where Kyle is. Kyle's my son, my only son. Only he's dead, and has been dead for 42 years. My heart nearly stopped and sank into my gut, and my tongue felt stuck to the bottom of my mouth. The shock of the words hit me like lightning. He was dead. Was this real life? Had our meeting on Twitter, our lengthy conversations, our date, the love we made, all been a beautiful nightmare? A false dream? There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe it was someone else trying to assume his identity. I struggled to speak, petrified. "Mr. Rokins, do you have a picture of Kyle? Maybe we've both been fooled by someone pretending to be him." She wiped her tears. Of course. She walked out the scope of my vision and into the kitchen. I heard a drawer open and close. She briefly reappeared. It was an old, faded black and white pocket-sized photograph of his graduation picture. It was definitely Kyle. I couldn't forget that heavenly face if I tried. This is his high school graduation photo, taken in 1967. I felt sick to my stomach. Who was the man I had slept with? Was it a ghost? A hallucination? No, I wasn't crazy, and I'm not going to believe the improbable fairy tales or ghost stories. I remember feeling him physically, feeling his skin, his hair, his breath, his heartbeat. He was real, and I was sure of it. How did he die, if you don't mind me asking? My voice was still shaky, my mind bewildered and with disbelief and anxiety. Suicide over a silly little girl. The expression of her grief-stricken face suddenly turned into one of disgust and anger. "You'll have to go now. I'm sorry." I could tell there was something she wasn't telling me, and with that, I left. For some reason, I started thinking about killing myself on the way home. I felt absolutely betrayed, treated by who or what? I'm not sure. I called in sick to work the next day and spent the day laying in my bed under a heavy buzz of Patron, withering in desolation, torturing myself with my own thoughts. It was funny because I still craved for who I thought he was when I'd first met him. I even felt utterly pathetic for being so attached to someone who might no longer even exist. The ultimate catfish. I began to believe I was actually insane. The week after was when the morning sickness began. My appetite increased greatly, and I began to constantly feel tired at work no matter how much I slept. There were symptoms of a condition that I'm sure you're all familiar with. Kyle was the only man I'd ever slept with in years. I didn't want to believe it, but my intuitions began to increasingly agonize me, so I finally took a self-test to verify them. I was right. I'm pregnant. With what? I don't know. To top it off, today I woke up to a text. It was from Kyle's number. "Miss you dearly, Anna," it read. "My name is Lauren." Tinder. The app that allows you to swipe between people solely based on their appearance. Young people's heaven, right? Well, what started off as some harmless fun escalated into a complete nightmare. I'd like to say at this point that I was never into dating apps. The whole concept was just too weird. After watching episodes of MTV's Catfish, it confirmed my belief that talking to and meeting people online was a bad idea. However, after months of my friends using Tinder, I thought, fuck it, and decided to just download it. What could be the harm? My ex had cheated on me a few months prior, so after countless days of mourning the relationship and questioning everything possible that I could have done wrong, I decided to get back into the dating game. After a few days of using the app, I started to get into it. 50 matches and 6 proper conversations with people. To me, that was an achievement. Then I saw Hannah. Her profile was in a league of its own. Her pictures were beyond perfection. Her profile bio talking about her previous experience working in clubs and studying fashion at Northampton College. She was beautiful. I swiped yes, hoping it would match us. It was! I couldn't believe my luck. I wanted to keep it cool and not message her too quickly. After what seemed like a day, approximately half an hour, I said, "Hey." No reply. I started to panic. Fuck, I could have messed it up, I thought. I went through all the possible ways I could have fucked up with "hey." Should I have said "hi" or "sup"? Too late now. An hour passed. My phone vibrated and a Tinder notification from Hannah read, "Hey." Success. And so we began talking, discussing our hobbies, interests, previous relationships, the lot. After a few days of talking, I felt like I knew this girl inside and out. Her parents had separated and she lived with her dad, taking on 2 jobs to support herself and him. She was a Virgo, I was as well. It was going great. It got to the point where it just felt right to ask, any chance we could meet up at some point, get a drink, or go for some coffee? Sure. My heart raced. I didn't think she would have said yes. We exchanged numbers and continued texting for a while, arranging to meet at Sazerac, a cocktail bar in Northampton. 8 p.m. that night. I got on the bus and started walking towards the bar. My heart kept racing and palms began to sweat. What if she thought I was ugly? I kept thinking. I approached the entrance of the bar, arranging to meet her here before we went in. This is where it got weird. She didn't text much that day. Just short sentences and long amounts of time between responses. I assumed she was just nervous. My phone vibrated. Hannah. Babe, I just walked past you. You're so much more beautiful in person. I was too nervous to say hi. Please forgive me. I looked up from my phone and scanned the street area surrounding me. Just a few students and some elderly people coming home from the theater. Where are you? I want to meet you, I texted. No response. I texted again, you winding me up, LOL? I still got nothing. Maybe I had got catfished. I mean, this girl couldn't possibly be intimidated by me. She was too attractive to be. My phone bleeped. Please forgive me. Now I was getting pretty creeped out. The combination of the darkness and the lack of people on the streets didn't help. I kept looking around to try and see her. Then, out of the corner of my eye on the other side of the road, a silhouette of someone standing, facing me. It was too dark to make out any features of the person. I just noticed a long black jacket with the hood up. That couldn't have been her. I slowly reached into my pocket and sent her a blank text. My gaze still firmly on this figure. A phone lit up in its hand. Fuck this, I thought, and started my power walking the other way. Who was it? Another text. Why are you walking away? Am I not pretty? That did it for me. I knew I had been played. I felt like a complete idiot for falling for it. All I could think was getting back home and forgetting this ever happened. Hannah. I am a pretty girl. You will see. That made my skin crawl. I refused to respond to it. All I could picture was some strange woman texting me now. The aura of Hannah was instantly gone. The whole way home, I felt like I was being followed. I don't know if it was just my paranoia or if someone actually was. Either way, I had to get home. I lunged through the front door, locking it and checking all the windows and back doors were locked. I needed to get some sleep. It took me a while to drift off, my mind still replaying that figure standing there. 4 a.m. I woke up to the vibration of my phone, the immediate brightness blurring my vision. As my eyes adjusted to the screen, I looked at the notification. Hannah. My heart froze. I opened the message. It took me a second to process what it was. It was a picture message. A picture message from Hannah. My blood went cold. On my screen was a picture of my bedroom from the door. Attached to the photo was Sleeping Beauty. I was facing away from the now opened bedroom door, knowing full well before I went to sleep I had closed it. The light from the hall had illuminated part of my room. I sat up in my bed and almost instantly, head now facing the door. Standing in the doorway in a ripped, dirty, knee-length pink dress was a man. A 5-foot, extremely elderly man wearing a blonde wig and what I could make out to be a pink eyeshadow and red lipstick. His eyes were wide and fixated on me. The room was silent and all I could hear was his heavy breathing. I looked in the horror at this figure standing not 5 meters from me. I couldn't move, I couldn't speak, I just sat there on my bed in complete terror. The man took a step forward, so he was in better vision. His salivating mouth formed an abnormally large, cartoon-like smile. Don't you think I'm pretty? He said in a hoarse voice, his mouth still grinning. Words tried forming in my head, but none of them would come out. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. My heart was going into overload. Who are you? I could hear the fear in my voice. I couldn't think properly. My legs limp. The figure just stood there, eyes penetrating my soul. His smile grew larger, saliva dripping down his smudged lipstick. I am Hannah, and I am a pretty girl. You know those stupid dating apps that everyone has nowadays, right? I always find it funny that people harshly criticize the idea of dating online, yet they had all these apps. I was just 18 and still pretty insecure in my sexuality. I was just a typical 18-year-old college girl. I was having a great time meeting new friends, drinking until the morning, skipping classes, and rushing to get my work done. I decided to try out the damn dating apps after weeks of my friend Alexis telling me how great it worked for her. I felt like college was a new beginning for me, so I thought maybe I'd give the whole boyfriend thing a try and see what happens. The worst that could happen is I don't like anyone, right? So I downloaded this app where a bunch of pictures of guys come up and you either swipe right or swipe left depending on whether you find them attractive. It was all a bit shallow to me, but still decided to give it a go. Pretty much every guy that I swiped right saying I like to ended up swiping right to ask me to send pics of my tits, so I figured it was pretty much a complete fail. The first few weeks I had the app, it was pretty much just dick pic central. Not like I was surprised. Until one afternoon, I was in my education philosophy class on my phone, not paying attention to the lecture at all. This guy's face came up on my screen, and his eyes shot through my body like electricity. I knew it was only a picture, but I felt like he was staring into me. He was a 21-year-old guy from the town over. He had dark chestnut brown hair and piercing ocean blue eyes with a jawline that was so defined it was godly. I swiped right and saw immediately that we matched. I smiled and blushed a bit as almost he was really with me. It was maybe 20 seconds after we matched that he sent me a message. Hey, beautiful. Could this be real? No dick pic, no show me your tits? I messaged him back and we talked the whole day. He was the absolute sweetest. His name was Josh, and we had so much in common. We both loved old horror movies and traveling. We even joked about how we could both just leave town, travel the world, and never look back. He was really funny, too. His jokes made me laugh my head off. He stole my heart, and I had never even seen him in person. The app was a success. The next day, I woke up to a "Good morning, beautiful" message from him. My heart fluttered like a million butterflies. It was Friday, and I had no Friday classes. I expected to spend the day hanging out with Alexis and maybe have a quiet wine and movie night with my friends later. Do you want to come to my place tonight? Josh messaged me. My heart stopped. I thought a million thoughts at once. I had never met someone from the internet in person. What if he thinks I'm ugly in person? How will I even get there? I'm not telling Alexis about him. Would she be mad if I went without telling her? I was so conflicted. I decided not to answer and think it over. I didn't want to tell him I was thinking about it because I didn't want him to think I was a catfish or something. A few hours passed and I'd been thinking about nothing else. I got another message. So I was afraid of losing a really great guy by not meeting up with him. What if he moved on to the next girl and just forgot about me? I couldn't let that happen, so I told him I would. He sent me his location, 341 Maplewood Drive. It was only a short bus ride from me. He told me to come at 9 p.m. and that the door to his apartment was around the back and down the stairs in the backyard. I didn't tell Alexis or any of my friends that's where I was going. I told them I was going to the library to study for my economics test. Alexis offered to come, like she always does when I studied, but I had to make up a quick lie that I was already meeting with someone from my class and I think they just wanted it to be us. The day dragged on. My heart rate increased with each passing hour. 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m. I was so nervous. I got all dressed up and straightened my hair, which caused Alexis to ask me why I was getting ready for the library. I lied and said that the guy from my class was cute. Finally, it was 8:30 p.m. and time to take the bus to Maplewood Drive. The bus was really dead. No one on it besides me and an elderly lady. I sat quiet in the front, tapping my feet on the ground, playing with my hair and trying to calm myself down. I could feel my pulse in my neck, throbbing with nerves and anticipation. I even contemplated getting off and taking the next bus back to campus. Was I even ready to date? Maybe this was a bit too soon. I reminded myself that I always chicken out, and I gotta do this just in case he was the one. The bus came to a screeching halt at the end of Maplewood. I slowly staggered to my feet and felt my heart fly into my throat. "Thank you," I said to the bus driver as I exited. The bus picked up and took off down the street, disappearing into the distance and leaving me alone on the road with nothing but the buzzing sound of the freeway in the far distance. It was quiet. I walked slowly down the road, giving myself time to catch my breath. "It's gonna be okay," I kept trying to tell myself. "Everything is gonna be alright." Finally, I came up to a large Gothic-styled house, tall and thin, made of brick but painted over in red paint. My stomach turned when I saw the house number. 341 Maplewood. I walked up the driveway into a half-open steel gate that led into the pitch-black backyard. I stopped, took a breath, and then walked into the yard and blindly made my way to the back of the house. There was a light in the back, and as I got closer, I noticed a tiny fire in a fire pit, unattended and burning wildly in the darkness. My heart was beating rapidly. I turned and saw the staircase leading down to a wooden door. No windows, just a tall wooden door at the bottom of the darkened stairwell. I wanted to turn around, but I already made it this far, and it would have been a waste of $2.50 to take the bus here for no reason. I walked slowly down the steps. I fixed my hair, checked my breath, I put on a warm smile as I reached the bottom. I knocked 3 times on the door and waited. I kept that smile on my face, trying to make myself look less nervous. I began to hear shuffling from behind the door, the sound of papers moving or someone moving a trash bag. Suddenly the door swung up and a tall man in a stained white t-shirt and jeans with wild, untamed black hair and an unshaved face stood in front of me. "Damn, my brother's lucky to be getting with that," he said to me in a hoarse voice that sounded like he smoked 3 packs a day. My heart began to pound. "Don't look so nervous. Just come in. Joshy is in the shower getting ready for you. Didn't want to look bad for his slam piece." I felt really uncomfortable. I wondered why Josh didn't already shower before I got there, but regardless, I felt awkward and walked slowly into the house. As I passed the man, I could feel his warm, unclean breath under my face. I heard the shower going in the distance, and I sighed with relief. It was a studio apartment with just a small kitchenette and a bed in the center. There was a door leading to what I assumed was the bathroom, and since that was where the shower noise was coming from. "Sit on the bed, pretty lady. Make yourself at home," the man said next to me with a big grin. "I'm just gonna go out and smoke a cigarette. Josh should be out any second now." I walked over to the unmade bed and sat down, letting out a nervous laugh. I really don't know why this guy was here. Didn't Josh plan for us to be alone? I was just picturing Alexis at home with wine and a movie and was starting to regret my decision a bit. I hoped that it was just the nerves and that once Josh came out, I would really start to enjoy myself. I took deep breaths. A minute passed and I was growing even more nervous. I began to look around the apartment. It was small. This man who says he's Josh's brother must just be visiting. There was definitely no way they both lived together in a small space like this. I turned and looked towards the bathroom door, which had steam coming out from underneath as the shower ran. I smiled and pictured Josh walking out, rubbing his head dry with a towel and smiling at me. I turned and saw a television set that was atop an old oak dresser directly in front of the bed. There were a bunch of knickknacks around the TV, like bobbleheads and whatnot. I stood up and walked over to the dresser, curious if there were any pictures of Josh when he was little. I flicked the head of a duck bobblehead and watched as it bounced back and forth with the same dull expression on its face. I was just trying to distract myself, calm my nerves. I noticed a small box on the dresser. I looked around and still heard the shower going and the door was closed, so I decided to open and sneak a peek. I opened the box and saw a stack of papers. Small little notes with addresses and women's names on them. I picked up the stack. Wow, I thought to myself. Just my luck, Josh is probably a player. I shuffled through the papers, looking at all the different names of the women until one stood out to me. Written on the paper was Laura Anderson, 19, Stubhorn Building, Room 233, Jefferson University. Tightest I've had, Marlboro Junkyard. My hunk sank into my chest and my eyes began to water up as I held the tears. My heart began to beat like a drum in my chest and my vision went blurry. Ugh. Laura Anderson. I cried to myself in disbelief. My head began to go numb. Laura Anderson was just a girl that went to my school. We were all alerted after she had gone missing last spring. They eventually ended up finding her body in a junkyard with her head in a box and the rest of it wrapped in a tarp. It was the biggest news of the year. In a small town like this, stuff like that doesn't happen. They never even found out who did it to her. I turned fast and knocked the box over onto the ground, and Polaroids fell out and scattered across the brown rug. My heart raced, and I held back screams as I looked down and saw the Polaroids were of a man in a stained t-shirt. He was posing with the bodies of decapitated women. I saw Laura Anderson. My legs grew weak and my vision fuzzy. I began to cry uncontrollably when I suddenly heard the door open. I ran as fast as I could into the bathroom and slammed the door shut behind me. I turned around expecting someone to be with me, but the shower was running with nobody in it. I fell to the ground and began to scream over my tears, praying to God this was all just a nightmare and I was back in my dorm with Alexis. I heard the man behind the door pick up the papers and begin to laugh loudly to himself. The laugh was deep and demonic, and it grew even louder as the man walked slowly towards the bathroom door. I looked up through my tears as the door slammed open and the man looked down at me. Come play with Joshie.